I'm Mike Kidik, product officer at PortaOne, and my first block of features will be dedicated to the web interface. And let's speak about the main menu, because this is a feature that every user of PortaSwitch has to use. In order to get anywhere on the web interface, you do have to go through the main menu. The major issue with the existing menu is that some of the items are buried deep within the menu. Like we are talking about 3-4 levels. And when you want to set up certain things, for example, you want to set up routing plans, it means in the current menu, you need to open infrastructures and expand voice calls and go to the routing section, and finally you have your routing plan. So it's like click, 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 multiple clicks to get anywhere. Of course, there is a search, and I know that majority of our users do use search to find a particular menu item. But search has two drawbacks. First of all, you have to remember at least one word from the menu name, so you can type it. And secondly, you do have to type it, so it takes time. So, you know, search is good, but it's not great. And we were thinking about how we can redesign the menus to make it easier to use. And first of all, we simplified it down to 2 levels. So now the whole menu is just 2 levels, no more. The first level of the menu is pretty much the same as it used to be, with a few small changes. But the major change, the fundamental change here, is you don't have to click anything. If you want to open voice call processing, you just need to move your mouse pointer over that menu item, and the second level shows up automatically. Then, of course, you go to the second level and you click your your routing plans, and you're good to go. You're good to manage your routing plans. So basically, this change makes all menu items, like all of them, accessible within a single click. So they are all 1 click away. We hope this change will make the work of billing administrators easier and will enable them to do their job faster. The next change on the web interface is about creating new objects. And I'm talking all objects like customers, accounts, products, routing plans, you name. Currently, there is a creation panel, a narrow panel right next to the search panel. And I don't know about you, but quite often I and some of my colleagues would run into a situation where we want to create a customer, let's say, and I start typing customer information, just to realize later that I was populating the search panel instead of creation panel. So I had to switch to creation panel and start filling in all the stuff again, which is quite frustrating. So the major goal here is to prevent users from confusing search panel and create panel. And that's why we move creation of the objects into a side sheet. This is a special panel which slides out on the right. And this is where you will be creating all the objects starting from maintenance release 110. So as I said, the main goal was to stop this confusion between search and creation, but also using side sheets opens some new possibilities for us in the future. With existing create panel, it's a narrow one, it's a small one, so we normally can fit something between like 5 to 10 parameters into that panel. And usually those are just mandatory parameters that you have to fill in before you proceed with other parameters. So basically, currently, creation of objects is a 2-stage process. When you fill in the basic data, you click save, and then on a full-scale page, you continue adding other details of customer, for example. And then you have to click save again, right? So with side sheets, we'll be able to eliminate that in the future, meaning that we can put more information into a side sheet. Side sheets can be as wide as half of the screen, for example. They can also include tabs. So we'll be adding more and more parameters to new objects. So when you create an object, you just populate everything on in a single place, click save once, and you're good to go. And the other thing is that in the future, we will be changing the concept of how you proceed with the sequence of creating new objects. So for example, you need a new product, and in the product you also want to include a subscription, some monthly charge for a customer. So you start with creating a product, and then you realize that subscriptions that you want to include hasn't been created yet. With existing interface design, you have to remember all these relations between the objects, and you have to create your building bricks first, and then you can go ahead and create the product that you wanted to create in the first place. With side sheets, we'll be able to change that concept, because side sheets can be opened one on top of the other. So for example, when you're creating a product and you realize that you need a subscription, you'd be able to invoke another side sheet on top where you create a subscription, click save, you go back to your product creation, and your new subscription is already selected in the list. So again, you will not have to remember all these relations and all the additional objects that you need to create before you can create a product. These changes are not going to happen overnight. It will take us some time to go through all the objects in PortaBilling, and there are quite a few, as you're probably aware. So, but eventually, maybe in a few months, maybe in a year, we'll have all objects covered, creation of all objects redesigned, that it has a lot more information available in the first place, and it also allows you to invoke this additional object creation. And the last feature related to the new web interface is a new portal for distributors. So basically, it now follows the current concept of administrator web interface. It has modern look and feel. It's much faster than the old interface used to be. So we hope this change will allow you to onboard additional distributors and expand your sales channels. So we are done with web interface changes. Let's speak about call-related features. So this one is quite important these days in the telecommunication world. I remember back in the day, like, I don't know, 20, 15 years ago, nobody really cared about CLIs. Like, most of the carriers would allow you to send whatever CLI you like, and it wasn't a big deal, right? These days, the situation is completely different. A lot of carriers would simply not accept a call if they deem CLI invalid. Some other carriers impose surcharges. So if they consider CLI invalid or CLI is missing in the call, they add a surcharge to the regular price for that destination. And we've been trying to cover this new requirements of the market for quite a while. We introduced some new features which were mostly targeted for North American market, but now we built what I believe is a better tool for validating CLIs and handling calls in a proper way. So you start first with marking your vendors. If your vendor accepts only valid CLIs and they reject calls with invalid CLIs or they impose surcharges, you would mark those vendors, or rather vendor connections, and then you would set up your own validation rules, meaning you would say which prefixes are okay for CLIs, which prefixes, how many digits should be in the number, and things like that. And when the call comes in, the system would apply those validation rules. It would check the CLI. If CLI is valid, no problem. The call is routed just like it's routed these days. I mean, all the other functionality for call routing kicks in. But if the system detects that CLI is invalid or it's missing, it would check vendors, and it would use only those vendors who basically don't care about CLI. And those vendors that you explicitly marked that they accept valid CLIs only, those vendors would be skipped. If a particular call or CLI in a particular call doesn't match any of your validation rules, as a last resort option, the platform would use special Google's library for validating phone numbers. It's called leap phone number. Now, there is one point that I would like to explicitly mention here. As I said, traditionally, CLIs were kind of neglected, and I know for a fact that on many installations of our customers, there would be CLIs in all kinds of different formats. You know, in a local format, in E164, with plus, without plus, and so on. Obviously, in order to do proper validations, CLIs have to be in some recognizable format. So as usual, PortaOne recommends to have numbers inside of the platform in E164 format, which means that when the call comes from a customer, you should apply a dialing rule to convert not only dialed number, but also to convert CLI. And then the system would do the processing, would validate the CLI. Maybe some other features would be used, like call screening or something else. But after that, when the call is sent to a vendor, you can again use translation rules on vendor connection to convert the CLI to whatever format your vendor expects. For example, if they expect a local format, a number in a local format, you can convert it from E164 to a local format and send it over to vendors. So this feature is supposed to slightly improve your calling service for your customers, because there will be no time wasted in attempts to route the call to vendor, which would not accept that call because of the invalid CLI. But the most important thing is that this feature allows you to stop revenue leakage. Like, for example, if you charge your customer a regular price and your vendor imposes a surcharge because of the invalid CLI. We've also enhanced SIM card inventory with additional fields like PIN codes, like activation codes for eSIMs, and a whole bunch of other fields. In addition to that, you can now use custom fields in the SIM card inventory. They work pretty much the same way as custom fields for customers and accounts. So if you have a business case where you need to store some extra information about the SIM card, for example, you printed a whole bunch of SIM cards for holiday season, so they have this, Christmas design, and the packaging is also about Christmas, and you want to explicitly mark that batch of SIM cards as the ones designed for Christmas, you can add a custom field which would say something like season or whatever you name it, and populate that custom field with information that this is Christmas batch. So you don't start selling those cards next summer by mistake. Also, you can now assign SIM cards to customers, not just to accounts. And the idea here is that business customers, they usually don't buy SIM cards one by one. They buy SIM cards in bulk, like, for example, 100 of them. And then whenever they hire a new person and they want that employee to have, corporate mobile phone, they would activate the SIM card just for that employee, and then the next day or sometimes they would activate the next card, and so on and so on. So you can now assign a bunch of SIM cards to a customer, making sure that that SIM card, which was physically sent over to a customer, delivered to the customer, doesn't get assigned to some account of another customer by mistake. You can also assign SIM cards to distributors and representatives. So you can keep track of which SIM cards are sold through which sales channels. All these changes are designed to make management of SIM cards easier and have better control over where your SIM cards are and how many you have. Now, the next feature is designed mostly for call centers. In modern call centers, it's typical for an agent, after they answer the call, to do some work after the call. For example, enter information about the conversation into the CRM system, or maybe create a ticket for their colleague to follow up on some customer's issue. This is generally called after-call work, and PortaSwitch now supports a special timer, wrap-up timer for after-call work, which you can set up for any hand group in the cloud PBX. And the timer kicks in automatically after the extension finishes the call. During that period, other incoming calls are not sent to the agent, so the agent is like marked busy. When the time is up, the system will start sending calls to the agent automatically. If the agent finishes the work earlier, they can go to account self-care, click a button, letting the system know that they are now available, and the system will start sending calls again. Or if some particular case requires more time, they can also extend the wrap-up timer on the self-care. Now, I'm talking here about our default account self-care. And I understand that for call centers, it's usually some dedicated software, or maybe some CRM integration, you know, having some widget or some small portion of page in the CRM. If you have applications like that for your call center customers, you can also utilize this wrap-up timer because you can control it through the API. So you can integrate these controls for wrap-up timer into your portal for call centers. Now, the other feature called supervision, which is also a call center feature, let me briefly remind for those who are not familiar with it. It's basically a feature for call center manager to connect to one of the ongoing calls of their agent. They can either monitor performance of the agent quietly, or they can whisper some advice to the agent and do the trainings this way for new agents. Or if a situation in particular call escalates, they can barge in on the call and basically take over the conversation with a client. That feature was introduced in the beginning of this year, but what we made available, what we changed now is that it is available in the call control API, you know, our API for managing calls. So if you do have those applications, which I mentioned earlier for call centers, you can now introduce, I don't know, a button on the portal, or, you know, some control in the application for managers. They can click it, they choose one of the modes, and your application can connect to an ongoing call, and the manager can do their job. So both this feature, the previous one and this feature, are basically designed to make your offers to call center customers more attractive, and we hope it will allow you to expand your sales. Now let's speak about resellers. As you are aware, resellers can have their own customers, and they can create their customers and accounts through their portal. Previously, when resellers created a customer, of course, there are default roles, so like default access rules for customers and accounts, and they could use just one of those default roles. But if administrator created some customized roles with some customized access to the self-care portals, reseller would see the whole list of customized roles for customers which are available in the platform. Like they had sometimes they would get a really long list of available roles, and it's easy to make a mistake. So starting from maintenance release 108, you can now select, you as administrator in PortaBilling can select which particular roles are available to each particular reseller. So when they create their customers and accounts, they only see a limited set of customized roles. So this way you have better control over what customers your reseller create and which access they grant to their customers. Now, the last feature that I wanted to mention is that we started building a new version of the API. The major goal of this new API version is to have a better naming for everything. I'm talking about objects, I'm talking about particular methods in the API parameters, and so on and so forth. It's not a secret that existing APIs that we have is pretty much a representation of the data model. So pretty much every object in API is some table or some object in the database. And also naming in the existing API is pretty much the same as in the database. And as you know, porta-billing was introduced more than 20 years ago, and some of the naming in our database is, let's say, it doesn't fit modern telecommunication world. So in the API 2.0, we will be changing the names of the objects and then the methods and so on. But in addition to that, we also want to introduce a few useful features. For example, one of the features is cherry picking particular parameters that the application wants to get. So for example, if application queries for a list of products and the application only needs the product name which administrators use and the product name which has to be displayed to the customer. So let's say this application is a customer portal. It can explicitly mention that, hey, I need a product list, but I need only two parameters, just administrator product name and customer's product name. And I don't care about any other parameters. So they can do that, and they can get a simple response, which would be basically a list of just two names. Our idea is that this should speed up development of new applications because developers will not need to bother about all the other parameters in the product. And product has quite a few parameters, as you probably know. So they don't need to bother, they don't need to deal with those parameters when they get the response from the platform. They just, work with the information that they particularly need in their application. At this point, some of you may raise concern like, hey, what happens to our existing applications, to our existing integrations, which utilizes existing API? Is it going to stop working tomorrow? You don't have to worry. We just started building this new API. It will take us a while to cover all functionality of porta-billing with this new version of the API, probably several months, maybe even a year. And only after that, we will start decommissioning the existing API. So your developers, it will be a gradual transition. Your developers will have plenty of time to get familiarized with new API, to prepare themselves and develop a new version of your applications which will be using this new API. It's going to be a managed control process, and also, as I mentioned, a gradual process. So that's it for the new features. Let me just briefly mention what we are working currently on, what is going to be introduced in the next maintenance releases. So first of all, we are bringing back the brand panel. The old administrator interface and the old self-care interfaces, they had this feature where you could put up a logo on top of the page, you could put up some HTML on top of the page. So we are bringing this back into the new interface. It will be a slightly improved version because you will be able to control that branding right on porta-billing web interface. And it will cover all the portals. So you can use brand panel for administrators, for resellers, for distributors, for customers, of course, and so on. The other features that we are currently working on is prepaid mobile bundles. So this is a new type of bundles. You know that currently we have quotas and wallets. This is something else. This is like you could say a third type of these packages. The unique features of these bundles is that it's a single lifetime for all the services included in the bundle. So if you have, for mobile, it's typical to have calls, SMS, and internet. So all the services are starting, and the period for the services is starting and ending for all the services at the same moment. It also has a single fee for all those services. And the most probably important feature that once the period for this bundle expires, the bundle can be renewed automatically if the user has sufficient funds for renewal. And as I mentioned, we've added quite a lot of features into the SIM card inventory. And one of them is being able to assign a SIM card to a customer. So we add a couple of new statuses for SIM cards. And one of those statuses is called reserved, which means the SIM card is assigned to a customer, but it hasn't been allocated to any account yet. And as usual, we would be happy to work on any feature requests that you may have. So if you have some business ideas, you want to launch some new service and you are not sure if you can do it with existing PortaSwitch or you need some additional features and so on, please do get in contact with our project management department, and our analyst will be happy to collect your requirements and we'll take it from there. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you have a great event. Cheers.